January 4th at 9 a.m. Good morning, Randall. Good morning, Danny. How are
Good
you,
morning,
gentlemen, this
Russell.
morning?
Doing well, man.
Good.
Delightful. Excited to be through the holiday season and ready to
Oh,
get back to
man.
normal
Oh my
life.
Oh,
God, right?
man. I say that again, man, because that is like,
Excited
I
to
am
get through
feeling
the
that.
holiday season and back to normal life.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
I am ready to
It's
get back
not,
to like a regular schedule again too. Yeah, it's like the
yeah,
holiday. It's nice to take a break, but God, it is hard too because it's just like I don't know when you have a schedule too. It's hard because you break it and then it's like everything feels out of sorts. Like,
totally.
And
everything.
this year,
It's,
because they both fell in the middle of the week, it was like two
Yeah,
full weeks of it. Whereas, like, if they fell on a Saturday or Sunday, it would only be 1 week of it,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think of that because it was, and they're always on the same days, so they're a week
yeah,
apart
Hmm.
exactly. So it is very yeah, it's very hard.
yeah.
Hmm.
It still doesn't feel like I'm back at it yet because kids have
No,
not gone back to school. So it's not like we're officially back in like real
what did
world
it go back
mode.
Monday or something?
I think the 7th. Oddly enough, Monday is like a day off. Like the Monday that they come back, they're like, sorry, it's a teacher in service or something like that. I don't know what
Ah,
it is, but
Oh
I
my
got
God.
stuff to do, man.
yeah. So Tuesday, I think, is the day they go back to school. But I think that's good. You got to like ease your way back into school. So like a 4-day week is
Yeah.
probably ideal. But
We have an awesome topic today, though.
we do. And I think this one I have to admit I actually forgot what our topic was going to be, so I chose this, but I think this is a great topic for the new year because one of my goals for this new year, and I think one of the goals of anybody who wants to become a web developer, is to build more, right? We should always be building more projects and coding more. And so, what better way to kick off the new year building more than to talk about how to actually go plan, build, and launch your first passion
I
project?
was gonna say, not even just build more, but build more unique projects of your own.
Yeah,
Not just
absolutely.
tutorials, not just following along with other people, but something that you plan start to finish that's your own, that's unique, and
Yes.
that's learning how to put all this stuff together and how to solve these problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, learning through tutorials is very important. However, it only goes so far in terms of learning, right? Because you don't get all of the experience of debugging
Well,
and
I'm
all the
glad you
things that
said
we're going to
that,
really
Russ.
talk about today. Yeah.
Because that's something that pretty much everyone in our web dev incubator comments on is when we're doing live coding together, it's totally different than any tutorial you
Yeah.
ever watch on
Yeah.
YouTube or Udemy or wherever you watch these
Hmm.
tutorials because it's not edited and done. Like real coding, what real coders do is they write code for a little bit of time and then they spend time debugging it, fixing
Yeah.
problems,
Yeah.
figuring out why it's not working. And that's what we actually do in our web dev incubator, which is really cool for everyone involved in there. But it gives you kind of when you work on your own personal projects, it gives you an idea of what the actual life of a real developer is. And that, when you want to get a job as a coder, that's the important experience to have because no one's going to care that you followed along a tutorial. They're going to want to know what
Correct.
Yeah.
problems did you solve on your own and how did you do it.
The other thing
Yeah.
too is that they get out of that I think that you never get from tutorials is explanations of why we're making the choices we're making, which are like you never get that of like why are you setting it up this way? Why is the data structured this way? Why are you choosing to go this route?
Yeah.
And there's a million ways to do everything we
Yeah.
do.
Make why we make those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like hugely beneficial, I think.
Yeah. Chris Raw, good morning, man. I'm glad to have you here. Um,
It is real deal.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you guys. I've saw something recently by a like YouTuber about this where he was talking about how when you watch a tutorial, like you just have this expectation of like they just like, you know, first first thing they did was just code it perfectly. And the
They just sat
reality
down and just like,
yeah,
yeah,
like,
carried this whole thing out in
you
three
know,
hours.
yeah, exactly. But the reality is like it's an iteration, right? I'm gonna try something to make this work. It didn't work, so I had to go back and fix it. That didn't work, so I had to go back and fix that. That didn't work, so I had to go back and fix that. And finally it works.
I was gonna say, actually, if
Right?
you want to be real, it's probably they have a team of people that do these projects, put them together, and
Yeah,
then pass off the code.
totally. 100%. But it's interesting because a lot of times when we have those calls inside the web dev incubator where we're doing a lot of debugging because we do code reviews inside the incubator and we walk through like each student's code, make sure that they're doing things properly, answer any questions for them. And a lot of times when we have those debugging calls, at the end of the call, I'm like, man, I wish I provided more value. I wish we talked more coding stuff. But interestingly, the feedback that we get is everybody's like, yo, that was awesome because I never get to see that. And it's actually inspiring to see other more experienced developers struggle because
Yeah.
I think the perception is when you're a junior developer that everything's a struggle, but as soon as you reach some level, it's all
It's easy,
easy. And the
right? Yeah.
reality
And
is like
you
it's a
think all
struggle all the
developers
way
are
up.
just wizards,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just like,
Well,
they just pull the stuff out of
a
nowhere.
big
Yeah.
part of this too, I think, is just how we portray stuff too in like media, like, like those movies like Hackers, like you mentioned, right? Like they're like just like, oh, you be like like typing so fast,
Dude,
like
the
it's
newest
absurd.
Mission
Yeah.
Impossible movie was great because they're like in an airport following someone around, and the guy's like, "Oh, they knocked down our communications. Let me just hack the satellite." Okay,
Yeah.
I'm in, and I'm like, "Come on!"
It's
Like,
like seven, but in
yeah.
done. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Honestly though, with script kiddies these days, like they're just like press to open an app, press go, and it's done.
Yeah.
Well,
You don't even
dude, they
need to
have
type
all the
it.
tools are already
Or
built.
he
You
just
just
went
got to
on the
Yeah.
know which
dark
ones
web
to
and
That's what
he
use
I
and
just
how to
went on
mean.
the
use them.
dark web and hired a hack to like
Yeah.
rented one.
Pretty much,
Oh God.
pretty much.
Well, yeah. So with that, I think today will be a great live stream because we're going to discuss basically how you can take an idea and turn that into reality, and every step along the way, how you're going to plan that, build it, and then launch it.
I
Go
want
ahead,
to,
Randall.
before we get into that, I want to give everyone a quick win. So I'm guessing that there's probably some people watching this who have already done a tutorial. And the
Hmm.
easiest way to create a personal passion project from a tutorial is just you change one little thing about the tutorial. Like, let's say you built something that used a specific API. Well, can you
Hmm.
use a different API to create a similar app?
Hmm.
Or maybe, like we were doing, we built a calculator, and then some people want to build a scientific calculator. You
Yep.
Yeah.
just do these little variations of a tutorial that makes it personal, that makes it your own, so that when you have it on your portfolio and you show people, you can say, hey, yeah, this is something unique that I did. These are the challenges I encountered, and here's how I overcame it.
Yeah,
Well, that's
absolutely.
just it. It's the talking points, right? You can talk about something you built yourself so much more in depth. You can talk about the
Yeah.
problems, the choices you made, but you can't do that with a tutorial because it's just arbitrary stuff, right? It's just somebody else made all those decisions.
Charles says, Russ, you actually go movie hacker speed during your code
Nice.
alongs.
Yeah, I mean, I do type pretty fast, but
It's hard
I try
not
to,
to.
it
It's
is
hard
hard
not to
not
though,
to.
because you feel like I don't know when I do it too, you feel like you want to get through as much as you can to make it valuable, but you also don't
Yeah.
realize like you're going super
What
fast.
you
You know,
the trick is to type fast and then wait so that
Yeah,
everybody, because the other thing too, and this happens when you watch coding tutorials, is we don't realize there is a time delay of like your brain has to process what the heck is going on. Like you're
yeah.
watching something, your brain has to process what you're reading, and you kind of have to wait till they finish typing it to
mhm.
understand it, and then you have to go and type it while they're continuing to type. So you're like always a couple steps behind.
Yeah.
And so I try to like type out a bunch and then like let it sit on screen and explain a little bit of why I type that, but it is tough.
Yeah, Charles
Especially
brings up a good point, though,
yeah.
that one of the first skills as a developer should be typing, like touch
Yeah.
Yeah,
typing.
like your typing
If you're a
speed.
two-finger typer or if you're a slow
Yeah.
typer, increasing your typing speed until they like, have like the Neuralink implants in our brains is going to be the best way to get stuff from our brain to the computer. So, working on typing speed is something that's definitely helpful.
You're also less
Yeah.
likely to make mistakes when you're typing, right? Which helps
And
long term
I've
too.
even found there are some touch typing programs like websites online specifically for programming type of stuff because general touch
Mm-hmm.
typing and programming typing you're going to use different keys than what you would
Mm-hmm.
use ordinarily typing. So it actually helps get your fingers used to that type of stuff.
This is
Yeah.
Charles just giving you a hard time. It's okay, Charles. I can take
We'll be all right.
your
We'll
tough
make it.
love. Um, yeah, I mean that has been a goal of mine for a while actually, and something that I try to focus on is typing efficiently and also trying to not use the mouse as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because every time that you take your hand off the keyboard to use the mouse, you're like wasting time. So there are some people who have, spent hours and hours and hours learning all of the keyboard commands, so they basically don't need a mouse. Because the reality is, you really don't need a mouse to use a computer. It's just a convenience thing. But yeah. So
But it also takes a long time to learn. And
It
and
it
does.
does. Yeah.
don't get disheartened because in the beginning, so like I I mean, I'm talking from experience. I've tried learning Vim and also Tmux and a whole bunch of stuff. And now
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, proficient but not like an expert at it. But in the beginning, it seemed impossible. And it seemed really,
Yeah.
really hard because you had to remember these key combos and it seemed overwhelming. But the more you stick at it, the more you use it. After about 2 weeks to a month, you start to get used to the most common things, and then you can look up anything else you need.
I think too, the
Yeah.
other important thing too is just over time you'll find what works for you too. And that will like, ultimately be the path that you go and you'll find shortcuts and stuff as you get better and more experience too that are make sense to adopt.
Yeah. I'm gonna go on a brief tangent just because I thought this was funny. Chris Rawl wrote, typing class in seventh and 10th grade was the best class. And I
Yeah.
totally agree, Chris. I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when you had those little like felt covers that they put over your hands when you had to take typing tests that they like
Yep.
put over so you couldn't see the
So you
keyboard?
couldn't cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like
Just
most of time in school was spent trying to dissuade cheating.
yeah.
Like they should have, like who
Yeah.
cares? Just let
You
kids
just let
cheat, and then
everyone
you
cheat.
Oh,
wind up like life will sort it out on its
Well,
own.
it's funny because I was like, as I'm thinking about this, I feel like nowadays they don't actually have computer class in
I don't think
school.
so,
They
no.
just give them computers and assume everyone knows how to use them. Because,
They
like,
don't offer typing and stuff. Like I took that in high
no,
school because
like,
computers were still new, dude. Like they weren't,
yeah. Well,
not a lot
dude,
of people
I
knew
had
how. So
computer class like from basically
it was an actual
fourth
typewriter too. I guess
fourth
typewriter.
grade through like high school. We
Yeah.
had computer class.
Yeah, we did too. Yeah, from like very early on. And it's like,
Yeah.
it was a great thing. I don't think
Yeah,
they
yeah, the orange felt covers. Yeah,
they have like those.
so
I don't know if
funny.
they actually have like even computer rooms anymore like that, like they used to, where you would learn that way.
Yeah.
It is a
Brandy
shame.
asks if there's a cheat sheet out there to help
Oh,
keyboard shortcuts. I'm
check
sure there
VS Code.
is.
VS Code actually lists like all of them. You can find them within this I think the settings and stuff. You can find out like all their shortcuts. You can also this is one of the things that ChatGPT and stuff is very good at is if you type in
Yeah.
like mo like best commands for that or something,
The
and
most
also if you
common
just
ones.
Google it, you'll find about probably 1,000 sheet 1,000 things people put together with the
Yeah.
best ones.
All right. Our tangents have gone on a tangent.
Long
Long
enough.
So,
enough.
yeah. So, what I want to do is outline, like, I have some ideas of what I use to build passion projects. There's no like perfect strategy to this. Let's just start with that. Is like, there's a lot of different options you have out there, and the type and I guess level of quality of the software you're building will sort of dictate a little bit
And
of this. Like,
complexity and stuff. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's a great point. Is good is better than perfect. So
Yeah.
yes,
if you have a portfolio with 5 good portfolio projects, that's so much better than a portfolio with 1 perfect or 0 perfect portfolio
Yeah.
yes,
projects.
Yeah.
agreed. 100% agree.
And
So
the thing with these projects too is you can always go back and update. And I mean, because that's a real app, right? A real app, you're going to add features later. You're going to go back and make changes. And I
yep.
think that's something you got to keep in mind is that you're going to go back and work on these and tweak these over time too. Do you want to
Yeah.
assume we have an idea? Then let's assume we have an idea for something.
Well, what is
Well,
a
so
passion
so
project?
so what I'm gonna do is this. Like, I think, yes, let's talk about what is a passion project, and then I'm gonna just outline the broad steps, and then we can sort of break each one of those down because I think
All
that's
right.
probably the most efficient way. But to answer Randall's question, what is a passion project and why? Right? Do one of you guys want to answer that, or would you
Sure.
like me
I
to
would just
answer
say
that?
like a passion project is something you're literally passionate about. It's a project that you're
Yeah.
motivated to complete that solves a real problem that you have. Because I think that's going to keep you engaged in it long term to finish it. Because here's the problem is most people when they're new, they'll start projects and abandon them when they get hard. Or they'll
Yeah.
move on to something else easier because the shiny object syndrome. So it needs to be something you're going to stick out and actually we want this to be deployed and live. So really, I think about it
Yep.
that way. It solves a problem that you have in your day-to-day life. It's something that you care about and something that you're willing to finish.
Yeah. I would say deployed live and ideally have real users.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's an important part of a passion project because ultimately any project, any software that you're building is built for humans. And so if you're building a project and no human, like, yes, it's out there on the internet, but no human is actually touching it or using it, you're missing one piece of the puzzle, which is like the feedback that you're getting from actual users.
Yeah.
So I think it
You
is
know,
important to focus on something that people will use. And if it's something that you're passionate about, then most likely other people will use it. Go ahead, Randall.
Yeah.
when you add that stipulation of having people use it, that
Yeah,
brings up the importance of creating a minimum viable product.
correct.
Because you don't want to, if you want your passion project to be something that people are going to use, you want to make sure that people use it first before you pour a whole bunch of time and energy into developing it. And you just have
Correct.
some giant program that no one uses. So creating an MVP, something that does the minimum that the project needs to do, and then getting it out there, seeing if people use it. One, you'll get the feedback sooner, but also uh, you'll make sure that there's actually demand in the market.
Yeah.
This is also
So
crucial too, because when you're working for others, like for clients, right? Like we just talked with something, a big project, you don't want to
yeah.
do the whole thing right away because they're going to need to
Yeah.
start talking to people, right? They're going to need to start getting this thing advertised and marketed. So you want something that's usable, that you can get out there as fast as possible, and that can then be, you can add on to it, right? You can always update these things later on.
Yeah. So let me go through the broad topics because we're starting to like chip into the details here. So here's like the broad plan for um, building your first passion project. So number one is the ideation phase. So some of the things that we just talked about, but finding that passion project. The second thing we need to do is planning, right? So we need to set some of the foundation for like what is this project. The next thing is development. So this would be actually like building out some of the app. Then it would be like design. So, completing all the UI, testing, right? So
We can just skip
debugging.
that.
Yeah, just skip testing completely.
Nobody
Nobody
in
tests.
production does
Nobody
that.
tests anymore.
Yeah.
No. And then your launch, right? So how are you actually going to like launch this, put this out there, and who you're going to tell about it? And then your growth phase and sort of like your maintenance, right? So let's go back to the top, and then we can like dig into each of these. So the first one is the ideation. Okay, so I think we talked about a couple of these things, but it's worth sort of going over them again. So we mentioned a passion project is something that you are passionate about. So, like, explain to me what you guys consider something that you're like passionate about, not necessarily like an exact thing, but like, what does that mean? Like, I'm passionate
So,
about a bunch of things, but how does that relate to a
I
project?
would say like, look, we all of us have come from different industries, right? We all did different jobs before.
Hmm.
We also all have hobbies and interests and things. So starting in those places, the everyday life that you live, and asking
Yeah.
yourself like, where is something that I could create something that would simplify my life, make it easier,
Hmm.
or improve it in some way? That is, I think, a great starting point, whether it's related to your past career or your current career or your hobbies or something. It could be, I think, Grandma mentioned one time, like your friend was a runner and just wanted to know, like, when was a good time to run with respect to pollution, air pollution. So creating
Hmm.
a notification system that notified him when it was good weather to run. That's a great idea. It's
Yeah.
simple. It's easy. I mean, it's relatively, easy to make, but it also serves a real end for him, which is now he has a way to know exactly when it's good weather to run, right? And healthy.
Yeah.
So that's a great
I,
example
I
of one.
think you actually make a really good point there, which is when we think about apps, the average person, we tend to think about these like wildly complicated apps because we just have these all the time now. But I think the
You mean like
reality is,
Adobe Photoshop or
yeah, or like, like
like
any app on your phone just has so many features. Like you think
yeah.
about like Duolingo or something like that, just a common app. Like there's like, that's a massive application. Like there's just
Well, but
tons
also
and
you
tons
can
of
see how
content.
that goes in the wrong way. Like take for instance Evernote. In the
Yeah.
beginning was an insanely useful
Yes.
app. You write down notes
Yeah.
and then they're on the cloud and you can access them wherever. And then towards the end of its lifespan, if it's still around now, it was terrible because there was so many features, it would just
Just so
bog down
much.
the app
They
and it
tried
just
to
Yeah.
would
make it
never
like
load.
Microsoft
Like,
Word and OneNote and
yeah.
Yeah.
and like a
So
Photoshop
so that's
editor.
actually my exact point, right? Is that I think that when I was a junior developer, I had these gigantic plans of, oh, I'm going to make this everything app that does all these amazing things. The reality is, most people just want an app that does one thing really well, right? That app that's like, hey, I just get a notification on my phone when it's like the air is clean enough to run outside, that's an amazing app because it does one thing, it does it really well, and it's simple. And that's a great passion project.
Actually, you know what's funny is one of the biggest complaints you hear from people with respect to a lot of software, especially like look at Adobe or look at like Evernote
Hmm.
and stuff, is that it's too like you need to
It's too
like you literally
complicated.
need to do tutorials to learn how to use the stupid
Yeah.
software. And most people are not expert as computers. They just use them. So the
Yeah.
simpler it is, the more likely you're going to get users, the more likely it's going to do its job well.
Yeah. That's something I hear actually pretty frequently is like when I build apps or websites for people, they're like, shouldn't we build like a video to show people
Yeah.
how to use it? I'm like, if you need to create a video
Yeah.
to show people how to use it, you're probably building the wrong thing because it should be pretty intuitive for people to use your website or
You
your
shouldn't
web
need a
app.
tutorial at launch.
Yeah. It's
So,
great. It's great to have, but
yeah.
it's not like, ideal. So
Oh wait,
go ahead.
before we finish the ideation phase. So another idea for passion projects would be things that you do over and over again. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself doing the same thing over and over again, you can clearly create some type of app or program for it that would make it simpler for you. But also going
Yeah.
back to what Danny was saying about looking at your hobbies, looking at your experiences in life, I think this would probably be a great area to prompt AI and say, hey, listen, this is my work
Yeah.
experience. These are my hobbies. This is my age, whatever, all this different stuff. Come up with 10 or 100 different passion project ideas for a beginner developer
Yeah.
and see what it spits out.
I
Yeah.
have a couple other suggestions too for finding a passion project. So we mentioned like, focusing on things that you're already interested in, like your hobbies. And one of the things that's helped me in finding passion projects is just sort of letting it come to me. So as you go about your day, if you have those moments in your day where you just feel incredibly frustrated at something stupid in life, like I don't know, like the ice machine doesn't like drop ice correctly or something like
Yeah.
minor like that, more than likely somebody else has the same pain point, and those are usually good opportunities for an app, right? Maybe not the ice machine thing, but like whatever it
Yeah.
is, like you're going about your day and there's just some minor frustration that you deal with repeatedly, it probably means an app could fix it.
Well, this is like that's like, there's a lot of space for automation, right?
Yeah.
Little tools that help automate things like emailing and stuff like that. People have to do all this crap all the time every day. And if you can find ways to make something like that easier, smoother, faster, you'll have a win. And
Yeah.
especially if it's something that bothers you, I think that's a great starting point.
Yeah. The last piece here that I think is important is getting feedback and doing some market research. So if it's an app that, maybe you've made a list of a bunch of app ideas, I write them in my like note taking app on my phone too. So anytime I have any idea, I'm just like write it down because you won't remember it. Like if you think you're gonna
Mhm.
remember it later, you won't. So just write it down. Um, but get feedback from people in the community or people who might find this interesting. Like if it's a tool for software developers, go inside of Code Noobs and make a Facebook post that says, "Hey, I'm thinking about this passion project. Would you guys use this?" Right? Or do you have any ideas of features or things like that? And the last part of that too is to once you have this list and you decide on one, you want to make the minimum viable product. You want to make the smallest possible thing that you can that has, maybe 3 to 5 features that solve the main problem for
It needs to
your
work.
audience.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
needs to work.
exactly.
You
But
need to
it
have a
doesn't
way.
need to have everything, right? It
No.
can just be like the main focus. That's good enough in the beginning for the MVP because you can always add to it, but creating something overly complicated in the beginning creates two problems. One, it just takes a while, but two, if you create this super complicated thing and then you bring it to market and the market's like, yeah, that sucks, we don't like any of that, then you just wasted all your time,
Yeah.
right? So you want to bring something small to the market and then add based on the feedback of the market.
You'll always get, I mean, we should say too, real quick, like in the sense of wasting time, like you'll always get benefit from building it regardless because you've built this project. But yeah, ultimately you want it to be used as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the next part is your planning phase, and this is setting the foundation. So in this phase, you're going to do a couple of things. You're going to define the goal, right, of the app. So like, what does the app actually do? Map out the core features that we just talked about. ideally like 3 or less, right? It should be like, hey, this app, you can input eat ingredients and you get 10 recipes back that you can build with those. That's the core feature. Um, then you're going to have to choose a tech stack, and then you can start building out wireframes. So let's go through each one of those a little bit. So defining the goal. I think it's really important here when you're defining a goal is really to focus it, right? Because most good applications do basically one thing, or one thing well. So focusing it in like one sentence, like, I have an app. It's like cover letter generator. So it generates AI cover letters in under 30 seconds. That's the core feature. That's all it really does, but people love it and you don't need much more than that, right?
No.
So yeah, and then you can map out like any other features so that are necessary. So like user authentication, payments, things like that. And these features are important because they're going to help you define your tech stack.
They're also going to help you start thinking about, I think, important things like the actual data you need,
Hmm.
how you're going to store it, how it's connected. Because you have to think, I think the thing we forget about the most when we're new developers is backend.
Hmm.
It's the front end's easy to visualize, the back
Yeah.
end's hidden and invisible by its nature. So it is hard, I think, for a lot of people starting out to think about how much time is the back end going to take? How is all this
Yeah.
connecting going to take? How does it actually work? And that's something you learn over time, but I think it's definitely important to think about early on in your project is how am I going to structure this?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So then we have to choose your tech stack. And we don't need to go too deep into this, but you have lots of different options for front end, back end databases, all of your APIs. You want to think about things like, who am I going to use for a payment processor? Am I using maybe AI as like a third party? Are there any other third party apps? What what database model do I want to use, like SQL or no SQL? What backend services am I using auth? There's just a lot there, but you're going to work through, your entire tech stack and make sure that you understand exactly what you want
And that they work together. That's the other
and
important
that
thing to
they
keep in
work
mind.
together.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
some are going to be easier than others. And you can figure this out pretty quickly by just doing some searching online.
Hmm.
It's not hard to figure
I
out.
also think for some beginner projects, you don't really need to go this far in depth.
Probably
Like just
not.
having a basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is enough
Yeah.
to start doing a lot of beginner projects.
Yeah. And, that could be your tech stack, right? You may not have to have like a JavaScript framework. Your tech stack could just be really the core web foundational languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which ultimately all these other things are just getting compiled down to anyway.
Yeah.
So might as well start there. So the last thing in this section is wireframing, and wireframing just means building out the pages, and you don't have to necessarily go as far as like using Figma or any other wireframing tools. We
Pen and
do
paper
this.
works
Yeah, like
really well.
exactly. We recently just did this because some of the members inside the Code Noobs web dev incubator group are actually working on a pitching a project together. Right, we just had a couple calls this week with somebody that we're doing a proposal for, so we're actually working with real clients inside the incubator, and we went through some of this ideation phase and some of this planning phase already, and we just wrote out the screens that we need. We didn't actually design them yet. So that may be part of, this part for you is just writing down what screens do you need. And by screens, we mean what UI does the user actually see. So when they
Yeah,
come on your
your landing
website,
page. Do you have an
yeah,
about page? Do you have a support page? Do you have, what's the main feature, page? What's that look like? Is
yeah,
it a one page or is it a multi, those sort of things you're just working this out. It can be on pen and paper. It can be you can use, Canva or something to quickly mock it up if you want. But the basic idea is you have a design of the overall project that you're going to build to just keep, this helps. When I first started out, I don't know about you guys, but I built a lot of projects without any planning.
hmm,
And it makes it take 1,000 times longer because you have no idea where your direction is and it's easy to get stuck on things. But if you
yeah.
have a plan, okay, I'm going to build this page, then I'm moving on to that page. And you work it out one thing at a time and it goes a lot smoother.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot too. And what I used to do a lot when I was just starting out was I wouldn't build a design for the page. I would like design it as I was coding it. And then
Yeah.
I would end up spending like 10 times as much time because I would be like, nah, actually, I want the corner a little more
And then you have
rounded.
to go back
Oh, I
and
want,
normalize all the other pages so it
uh-huh.
looks like a consistent thing and not like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh God,
And
yeah, I
that's
know.
why there are designers, right? Because we could do it that way, but it just saves time because a designer doesn't have to code it. They can just like use essentially Photoshop or Figma to just like drop an element on, take an element off, move an element back or forward. Like it just simplifies it. So
And also
uh
it's easier to, when you're starting out to know the colors you're using. Things like stupid things like this, like your color palette and all. If you're trying to
yeah,
pick that while you're working, you're gonna change it 100 times and it's gonna just waste time.
yeah. Okay. So that's pretty good for the planning phase. The next thing is development, right? So once you have everything planned out, you can start developing. And the first thing you're going to do here is really just set up your environment. So you're going to set up VS Code, Git, Node, if you're using Next.js, you're going to install Next or whatever you're doing, build your GitHub repository, and then make your first commit. And then from there, you can set up milestones for the project for the different features that you have. So, maybe this is where like depending upon the complexity of the project, you can sort of divert here into two different ways of thinking. If it's just you and it's a simple project, you can start just attacking it feature by feature. If it's a larger, more complex project that involves other people, obviously not like a passion project. This would be more like you're working for a company. There's more planning that goes into this. And typically you build in sprints. So you're building certain number of features per week. And, each week or 2 weeks is usually considered a sprint. And so different people, on the team will be assigned different parts of the project and you'll just build those out and then connect them.
I was gonna
Go
say, from
ahead.
a passion project standpoint too, I think the important thing is when you start out to like remember you're gonna have to connect the back end. So
Yeah.
starting with the front end is always a good idea to start getting things worked out. And
Hmm.
then like, I think usually for me a natural first step for back end connection is auth. So you can
Yeah.
start getting that user functionality built in. And then as you go, you just start setting this stuff up. You don't set up the back end right away, but you start building it out as you need it with respect to the front end. So like you build your form out first, get that working, then you connect it, right? And then you just start doing all
Yeah.
these things piecemeal like that until you have the whole project done.
Yeah. Depending upon how much of it I've planned out in advance in terms of like wireframing, I typically will do similar thing where I build the UI out first, and then connect like auth and a database.
Yeah.
And then you can start moving data back and forth, and then you can kind of go from there.
Well, yeah, because
Um,
like for instance, right, like a forum, you can verify that it works with console logs first. Make sure
exactly.
everything's set up, right? And before
Yeah.
you even bother connecting to the backend, because that's just going to waste a whole bunch of time of like, and it helps you think through too, I think, the data structure when you do it that way a bit, especially for a passion project where the whole thing's not planned out and written down.
Yeah. So, so yeah, at that point, you're basically building the basic features, connecting basic UI front end to the back end to auth to database, making sure that it works essentially, like the features work in the way they're intended. And then the next phase after that is like a design phase, and you could combine these, but this is really just like refining everything. So you've built um, the basic features, but now maybe you put in like your footer, your privacy policy, your terms of service.
Well, this might be
You
where you start
edit any
tweaking
styles.
responsiveness, things like that.
Yes,
Like you're going through and
responsiveness, things like that.
refining things, right? You're getting it to where it's ready for deployment. This is like the
Yep.
final part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes here, like a good one of the things that I typically do here is like add animations, right? Because animations are great. They make your website look really amazing and polished, but like not worth focusing a lot of time on in the
No.
beginning because if you build out a whole animation and then you scrap whatever you're
Component.
animating, yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make much sense. So this is a great time to add things like animation or maybe like customer support, like it's sort of like secondary features, I would say, and just like touching up the UI. And then after that is the phase that Randall never does, which is testing. The
Never.
testing and debug phase. So no testing, no debugging
I would
allowed.
say for
Not
a
unless
passion
if you want
project,
to work for a big company, you're
yeah.
going to want to avoid this
You want to
by
avoid
all
this
means.
entirely? Yeah, yeah, don't ever do it. Let people figure
What
it
Yeah.
was
out
that?
in
A
It's
live.
called beta
CrowdStrike or
testing
something?
for a reason. You
Yeah.
you ship the product before you ever test it.
And then if you lose
Yeah.
Forget
everybody's
security
information, you go,
testing.
oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No,
I was gonna say
we're
for testing though, like for a passion project, a lot of times you'll be doing testing as you build anyway,
yeah,
throughout, like because you'll be using it, you'll be making sure verifying things work. But you do want to do final testing once it's completed before you make it live, right? Make sure everything functions, make sure everything works right, make sure there's no bugs, check weird use cases like edge cases, like what if I do this? What if somebody enters this weird nonsense into the form field? What happens? Like all these things to help you kind of think through what you might need to do to make this thing work well.
yeah. I think it's important, and just to be clear, there's a couple of ways that you can conduct testing. If you're doing a just a passion project and it's something simple, you can probably just manually test it. It's
By
not,
using it, yeah.
yeah, just by using it, like running through all of the user flows. That's not ideal. Ideally, you want to have some programmatic tests in there too, like unit or integration tests. And really, the only difference between them is unit is testing one specific feature, integration testing is basically testing like a user flow. So like, how a user uses your app end to end from like signing on to getting the end result, whatever that is. And there's no like perfect test. There's no perfect structure for testing. You're just trying to cover as much code as possible and check that it's doing what it's meant to be doing.
I would say as an
Um,
individual from a passion project standpoint, you'll probably do this manually and just
yes.
check it through. Eventually, like for larger things, like large scale projects or enterprises, they have a whole team of testers that would
Yeah,
set up the automated tests, things like that. So it's oftentimes things that
totally. They
developers
have
won't even,
DevOps teams.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And also, one of the reasons why you'll see that a lot is because when you're working on large teams, um, oftentimes features are split between developers, so it doesn't make sense for an individual developer to write an integration test. They might write like a unit test for their feature, but it would be somebody from like a DevOps team who's actually building out an integration test that tests like how these different features or parts of code interact with each other. So agreed. There's people, there's developers who specifically work in that field. Um, the other thing I would mention here too is there is a website called Browser Stack, as in like your web browser. And that's a good one for just testing responsiveness on different browsers. So you could just like throw in your website in there and test how
Also,
responsive it
just use
is.
dev tools too, because dev tools are going to
Yeah.
be your best friend for this as well. And
Yep.
it's also just important to make sure that you handle errors so that you're not throwing a bunch of error messages to users that give them a ton of information about everything. You want to make sure
Yeah.
you handle them in a way where that's hidden and it still functions.
Yes, exactly. Cool. And then the last two phases are the launch phase and the growth phase. And I think they're pretty similar. So, in terms of the launch phase, this is where you're basically going to prepare for deployment. So, you're going to do a build of your application, figure out where you want to host it, whether that's like, through an actual service like AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or, some other service like Vercel, Netlify, Firebase
There's tons.
hosting, something like that. Yeah,
Heroku, if you're
there's
doing like
there's really
Python.
tons of them.
Yeah.
You could also buy a custom domain and set that up. And then from there, you got to get the word out, right? And this is one of the things that I think a lot of developers miss on is that you can put a website up all day, but that doesn't mean somebody's going to see it, right? You
No.
have to like go out there and tell people that it exists. So that's, I think, a really important phase. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, one of the easiest and cheapest is just on social media or going into groups that are related to your product. And you just have to be careful with this because depending upon what platform you're on, whether it's like Facebook, Reddit, LinkedIn, whatever, some groups will allow you to post sort of advertising type stuff, like where you're posting links to your products, like your app that you built. Some will not. So you just have to be careful and make sure you do that sleek, but get the word out there. And then you can also do paid advertising if it's something where you're collecting money and it's worthwhile.
And
you
you
can
can
do
do
that
that
down the
fairly
road.
cheaply on social media too. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something I would wait till a little later. Charles also has like besides your own projects, what are some examples? I would give another good example of a passion project that did very well was a guy. I remember this here with a guy built this was a while ago, but built an ad blocker that was a Chrome
Yeah.
extension and
Hmm.
made a ton of money on it. Very simple Chrome extension. All it did was like blocked. I think trackers or ads, one of the two.
Yeah.
But stuff like that can be very effective. You can build Chrome extensions can be a very effective way to do an easy passion project that just adds some functionality to a user's browser. I mean, there's literally tons. It's just a matter of figuring out what works for you. And another thing I
Yeah.
would add too, because I think this is something that stops a lot of people early on, is don't worry if something else already exists. Because
Yeah. It's actually a good thing.
there's 9 billion people on the planet. There's room for more than one of things. Look at AI, right?
I
There's
got
not just ChatGPT. There's tons. Yes.
I got
Yeah.
a couple ideas of simple passion projects that have become very successful.
Okay.
One would be YouTube.
Yeah,
Another
Yeah.
would
that
be
was a good one.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Hmm.
These are just simple ideas that people had. So YouTube was just hosting videos online. Netflix was sending DVDs in the mail.
They wanted to share a video from the Super Bowl, wasn't it? That's what it was
Hmm.
from, I think. Yeah, from the halftime show.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
these are just things that people wanted to do that made their life easier, and because it was useful and because a lot of people liked it, it built from there. And I mean, take a
Facebook
look at
was another
stuff.
one. They wanted a way to
Yeah,
just in college, right? That was a college project that he built.
and like
Yeah.
take a look at how things change over time. Netflix back in the day sent DVDs in the mail. Now it doesn't even exist. Back in the
Yeah.
day, you used to be able to get pretty much any DVD you wanted.
Yeah.
Now it's just the same garbage Adam Sandler movies over and
Yeah.
over again.
Because they signed a crazy contract with him, I know.
Yeah,
I wanted to say this too, and I think your question is great, Charles, because you're starting to see like a little bit deeper of like how do I find these special passion projects that make a lot of money. The question is great. The answer to that is not what you're going to think it is. There's no like formula
Mhm.
to what is a good passion project. The trick to that is actually listening to the market. And this is one of the hardest things for new entrepreneurs because new entrepreneurs generally want to do what they like themselves, or what they would buy. And just because you like it and you buy it doesn't mean everyone's the same. And so this is why we really focus on MVPs and building the most simple form of whatever you can and then bringing it to the market and getting feedback. And I think that's an important point here in the launch phase, which is like engaging with the people who are using your application and getting feedback. So, one of the things that I did when I built my first passion project is I went on Reddit and I offered people free beta testing credits if they gave me feedback. And so I would give them free credits to use the application as long as they would provide me with some feedback of their experience. And that's going to give you a lot of helpful information. Success comes from listening to the audience and giving them what they want, right?
Yeah.
That's all that it is. There's no like, if you build this app, it'll be successful, or build it this way, or use this framework. It's, I've seen apps. I mean, we've all seen it, like apps that you would be like, that looks like absolute garbage and nobody would ever use it. Like, think about like Timu, right? It's the most junk garbage app that uses like the 19 or like early 2000s advertising methods of like spin the wheel and you'll get 60 to 90% off your first, like, it is the most junk looking app in the world, but it's wildly successful because they just listened to the market. The market wanted cheap shit from China and they didn't
Yeah.
want to have to like pay Amazon prices, and they're willing to wait. Cool. And they built it, right? So I think it comes down to like just listening to your audience, building the MVP as quickly as possible with as few features as possible, and then getting that feedback from your audience. Um, and the last thing I would say here, which I think is a really, really important piece of this, if your goal is to eventually land a job with this, make a case study out of your passion project. So literally make, it doesn't have to be crazy long, but just detail your journey of building this proud passion project, about like the different ideas you had, how you came to this idea, how you chose the features, how you chose this tech stack, and your build process, and just put that in like a little PDF. And you can put that on your portfolio, or link it in your resume.
You could have as a
Um,
download from if they click on that project or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
but
there's lots of ways.
it's a really great way to basically be able to like show an employer what you did without having to talk them through it. You can just like send them the case studies or they can look at them.
That's the main point, right? You want something that works. Ultimately, ideally, you want something that hopefully will generate some income for you. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for work, the best thing about this is that it gives you something you can talk about that is your own, that you understand from start to finish, that you went through, you struggled with, and you know how the problems were solved. And that's going to be the
Yeah.
biggest, the biggest bonus for you in terms of finding other work and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you need help with
Yeah.
passion projects, join our web dev incubator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
Mhm.
we do inside the program. We're building projects together. We
All
are
the time.
like, I mean, it's really amazing to see what these guys
It
are doing
is.
in here. This week, we jumped on a call with one of the students inside the group who found somebody who needs a web app built, and this is like a 5 to 6 figure web app that we're
Serious.
working
Yeah.
through building a proposal with him and bringing it to this guy. And if he's ready to go, then we'll have a team of developers ready to build it. So that's one of the amazing things about this incubator is it's not a boot camp. It's not like anything else you'll see online. It
No.
is a community of very dedicated, aspiring web developers who are working together, collaborating to build a better future for themselves. So pretty amazing thing. It's awesome to see the progress of the people inside this group. So if it's something that you're interested in, we are more than happy to have you inside the incubator if you are a good fit, right? We want to make sure that you're really committed to this idea and you make a good fit. So if you are interested, just type in the comments passion project and we'll reach out to you. Or you can just reach out to one of us. And yeah, we'll set you up with an action call. And from there, we can discuss a little bit about your journey as a developer, give you some free mentoring, and see if you'd be a good fit for the Web Dev Incubator. And if you are inside the Web Dev Incubator, today is one of the best times of the year because we are doing our quarterly planning. And this is always one of the best meetings because we get to really think about like where we want our future to go, right? And plan that out.
Yeah.
So if you are inside the incubator, we'll see you in about 15 minutes. We're going to walk through our um, quarterly planning today and, sketch out what we're going to be doing for the next 3 months. So hopefully you guys will all be attending today. And with that, do you guys have anything else you would
No.
like to leave everybody off with? No? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Another Saturday, January 4th. We will see you next Saturday for another awesome live stream. Keep commenting, keep participating in the group. We love your comments. And certainly, if you have any questions, come reach out to us. Last thing, if you are watching on Facebook, why are you not in our? No, I'm sorry. If you're
On YouTube, why are you
if
not
you're
in
on
our Facebook
YouTube,
group?
why are you
There you
not on
go.
our Facebook group? Yeah, come over and join us on facebook.com/group/code noobs and participate in the community because YouTube is great, but our community on Facebook is just incredible. So come join us over there. Facebook.com/groups/code noobs. With that, have a great Saturday. Love you guys. And
Later.
we'll see
Later.
you next week.
Peace.